I've been messing with this video for a few days now, but first and foremost I want to say this is just my own personal opinion, just me thinking out loud. I don't mean to dismiss your opinion or to change it. You love what you love and hate what you hate. Art is subjective, so experiencing a book or a movie is subjective. This is just me thinking out loud. That being said, some time ago, around the 5th episode I think, I told you guys watching The Wheel of Time was making me develop voices in my head with very distinct, very different opinions on what we were seeing. At first I thought it was just my own messed up brain jumping from this to that, from one point of view to another. But then I feel some of that dissonance has to do with the show itself and how it's run and written. Anyway, let me introduce the voices again and you'll see what I mean. Bear with me, there's a point. Which number one has the oldest voice? That's the fantasy reader voice. I read The Wheel of Time when I was 11 or 12. First fantasy I read after Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. So it has been in my life for a while. It's like this bit here. If I hadn't read it, I might have turned out a completely different person, who knows. So that voice is either fangirling and super excited that there is an ambitious fantasy series in production for me to watch, or it's being petty and touchy about the changes and mentally hugging my beloved characters and smacking Rafe's hands away if he tries to mess with their core personalities. Then there's the creative wise-ass witch, the part of me that talks about tropes and character arcs and what symbolizes what and gushes over beautiful scenes and excellent light and videography, and this is also the part of me that is most sympathetic to the process and how hard this or that part must have been. And next is the most problematic witch of the three, that's the grump of the trio, the immersed viewer. She is particularly pissed off because a lot of the time she feels like there is a bungee cord attached to her and occasionally it jerks her right out of the story. When you hear me say this makes no sense, that's usually her. I kind of really wanted to make this video a conversation of the three witches, but right now I really can't be bothered with the post. So what I'm getting at is that perhaps the reason for all the different opinions and the conflicts between viewers and different opinions and my own inner conflicts is that the Amazon show is pretty good communicating with witch number two, but not so good talking to the other two. Witch number two isn't too happy either, but much more understanding, and she can occasionally go, "Ooh, that's pretty, totally worth it," or "That's a cliche metaphor, but I get it." Because I think parts of the season, certain more problematic scenes, get better if you don't look at them literally, like actual events, but more metaphorically. Like, for example, take the huge wave rising from the Seanchan ships as a metaphor for looming danger. But I think in general, in fantasy especially, suspension of disbelief is already a factor, a big one, and pushing it too far would not be doing anyone any favors. For me, dispensing with logic and focusing on what would produce immediate but shallow emotional reactions is understandable for a show that wants to attract new viewers, but it cannot stay on top of the list of priorities for too long. Admittedly, I don't even know if I'm quite right about what produces emotional responses, because I myself am a very empathetic and emotional viewer. I'd get almost tears in my eyes, and at the same time half of my brain would be going, "Wake up, my friend, this is really bad." So yes, I think in season 1 the biggest issue is pushing the suspension of disbelief too far. Book fans know too much and new fans don't know enough, and witch number 3 is going and she's yanked back out of the story and has to talk to the other two witches in order to find her way back to the Wheel of Time world. But I am a positive person, and I'll pause here and interject. There is a lot of good to praise here. One of the big things the show did right was casting. I haven't commented much on that, but even though a lot of the characters are not what I had in my head, most of them absolutely deliver when given the opportunity. Rand is so spot on, I can hardly believe it. Yasha can cover the full spectrum of book Rand. He can be the sweet and somewhat naive village boy, the kind of arrogant prick, and the quick-tempered and independent young man, and everything in between. Barney didn't look like my Matt when I first saw him, especially the way he's first introduced in the show, but I converted. He made me completely fall for his Matt, and he was spectacular. Best and worst surprise of the show was how good Barney was and that he had to leave. Do I even have to mention Rosamund Pike? Half the show rests on her performance, and though certain dialogues and scenes felt off in terms of writing, her delivery was great every time. Lan and the rest of Demon Field 5 are awesome too, and even Loyal. Ahmed has to work with all that makeup and prosthetics and that incredibly distracting hair, and still manages to make me see him as Loyal. And villains like Valda and Liandrin and Padan Fain are just despicable from the first second you see them. So yes, in my personal opinion, casting was one of the things that the show did right. So I hope we can be happy for that for one moment. Now to the visual side of things, I think we got some really pretty shots here and there. We also got the horrible CGI of the Trollocs in episode 8, but I try really hard to forget that. When it comes to sets, I am genuinely impressed at what they managed to achieve. When it comes to costumes, not so much. I think still that the Aes Sedai have a kind of uniform feel to them. Even though that they're different costumes for the different Aes Sedai, they have a very similar feel to them. But I appreciate that the different Ajas need to be clearly communicated to the new viewers. So if the price is the uniform look of the Aes Sedai, that's the lesser of two evils. Because when it comes to clarity, the show is not doing so well. It's often confusing or contradicting itself, and it's easy to get lost and wait, what? But didn't you say? But how? For someone who hasn't watched the show or read the books yet, I think the best advice I have to give is watch all the bonus materials and join a community or conversation somewhere, be it on Facebook or in the comment sections here or anywhere else, and ask questions. As a fan of the story, I think it's worth the effort. I'm aware this is a kind of backhanded compliment, but I think one of the best decisions in the show was including the animated shorts and the behind-the-scenes clips. Certain ideas and points weren't really clearly communicated within the episodes themselves, so for that, the bonus materials do help. I get that some level of mystery keeps the viewers guessing, but I don't think they should be that often confused. A simple example is Egwene healing Nynaeve. When you look at the behind the scenes of this particular episode, you get a conversation with the makeup artist who explains the levels of makeup for this particular shot, and rating them from 1 to 10, she puts Nynaeve at a 4, which means it should have been clearly visible that she is not dead, but unfortunately the scene takes place in the dark, there is CGI applied after that, and that's not what's communicated in the end product. Nynaeve's words add to that because they sound like she is imparting a final message on her friend and apprentice, and you are left believing that you've just seen 4 women die in the very same way. On one hand, death is not supposed to be healed at all, let alone that lightly. But my main issue with this is that the show apparently didn't mean for it to look this way, but it definitely does. So yes, clarity and decent understanding of the world and the magic system are really important for production of this type and need improvement in this particular case, because when you don't have it, it leads to very unsatisfying solutions to problems. If neither the problem nor the solution are clearly communicated, it doesn't create enough investment, enough tension for the viewers, and no sense of joy or relief when the problem is actually solved, just overall confusion. But the animated shorts are just beautiful in themselves, in addition to explaining a lot. Balance is also something that I don't think the show is managing too well. We have 4 and then 5 ta'veren who are super important to the pattern and are supposed to have this huge impact on the world, but they are not even remotely evenly represented, and we get a very unfortunate amount of time to actually get to know them. Basically, we know that they are our main cast because that's what we have been told. But some of them really faded into the background, especially Perrin. The focus on balancing the Emond's Field 5 is actually done in a way that is more focused on introducing something special for each of them, be it a major drama or a magical feat or something like that, but we don't get to know them as people on the same level at all. My personal preference would have been to have them introduced by starting smaller. Like, we get Rand carrying his bow all the time, on one hand ticking off the people who say that it shouldn't be strung all the time, on the other hand the people who say, but if it's unstrung it will look like a staff or a stick. But my point is, we don't even know by the end, by episode 7, that he's really good at it. For new viewers, it's not really communicated that Tam has taught him to be an almost infallible archer. So the first shots, when he misses the bullseye by an inch, they might seem like relatively good ones to someone who hasn't read the books. And Matt and Perrin don't even get that much. I mean, they are all people first and foremost, before getting any special powers or memories or anything. They could have been more focused on them in that way, in a way that would create character depth and understanding and establish their relationships naturally, instead of Egwene shouting that she would die for Matt, while at the same time I'm not even sure if she speaks 2 words to him during the whole season. In the bonus materials there are hints of some scenes that have obviously been shot and then cut, like one off the top of my head that includes a Baja story from Emond's Field, and I'm really sad we didn't get to see those. Also, for certain messages and ideas and lore and culture, they get communicated again and again and again, repeatedly by different characters, like for example Lan and Nynaeve's romance. It gets hinted at by almost every character again and again. And it's not always the most brilliant dialogue or connected to the context at all. We get the notion that wisdom doesn't marry, both through Lan and Nynaeve and Rand and Egwene, again repeating the same message. And at the same time, the viewer is left wondering what is ta'veren, who is the dragon, how does the power work, who is Loial, and what's with Perrin and the wolves, and certain things like that. So on the whole, I think the show does some things right, but a lot of it needs improvement. My biggest hope is that in the future the show will get the 2 additional episodes Rafe originally wanted. I'm not saying the story can't get better within 8, but I think more screen time would go a long way to fixing some of the issues, or at least making it easier for them to be fixed. The Wheel of Time is a story with many characters, and for them to have a proper depth and development, more screen time would go such a long way. If any of this makes sense to you, like, subscribe, comment, and we'll keep the conversation going with the Wheel of Time and other materials along the same vein. Either way, have a great year, guys!